I became a doctor because I wanted to save lives. That's what they tell you in medical school, right? That you're going to make a difference, that you're going to be a hero. But nobody prepares you for the moment when a 7-year-old girl looks you straight in the eyes, grabs your sleeve with her small, fragile hand and whispers, "Uncle, don't let me die." That happened to me on a Tuesday afternoon in September, in a small hospital in rural Virginia. And I need to tell you this story because it broke me in ways I never thought possible, but it also rebuilt me into the man I am today. My name is Dr. Michael Wright. I'm 43 years old now, but back then I was 31, fresh out of my residency, full of confidence and textbooks knowledge. I thought I knew everything. I thought I was ready for anything. I was assigned to St. Mary's Community Hospital, a place where we saw everything from farming accidents to elderly patients with chronic conditions. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real medicine, the kind where you knew every patient's name, their family history, their struggles. I loved it there. I felt needed, important, like I was actually making a difference in people's lives. That September day started like any other. Morning rounds, a couple of routine checkups, some paperwork. I remember I was tired. My wife Natalie and I had just had our first baby, a little boy named Jacob, and sleep was a luxury I barely remembered. I was running on coffee and adrenaline, counting down the hours until my shift ended. I wanted to go home, hold my son, maybe catch a few hours of rest. But then the ambulance arrived and everything changed. They brought in a little girl. Her name was Allison Rodriguez, 7 years old, brown curly hair, big hazel eyes that should have been full of childhood wonder but instead were filled with terror. She'd been hit by a pickup truck while riding her bicycle near her house. The driver said she came out of nowhere, that he couldn't stop in time. Her mother was screaming in the waiting room, completely hysterical. Her father was trying to hold her back, his face drained of all color, tears streaming down his cheeks. And Allison was on that gurney looking at me like I was her last hope in the world. The injuries were severe. Multiple fractures, internal bleeding, possible head trauma. My team moved fast, but I could see it in their eyes. That look. The one that says we're fighting an uphill battle. I pushed those thoughts away and focused on what I could control. I needed to stabilize her, get her into surgery, give her a chance. That's all I could think about. Give this little girl a chance to see another day. We got Allison into the operating room within 20 minutes. Speed was everything. Dr. Patricia Fisher, our best surgeon, was already scrubbing in. I was there to assist, to do whatever was needed. Allison was barely conscious, fading in and out. The anesthesiologist was preparing her for surgery when she suddenly grabbed my hand. Her grip was so weak, but it felt like she was holding on to life itself through me. She looked up at me with those huge eyes and said those words I'll never forget. "Uncle, don't let me die, please. I don't want to leave my mommy." Something inside me shifted in that moment. This wasn't just another patient. This wasn't just another emergency. This was a child who understood what was happening to her. A 7-year-old who knew she might not make it. And she was asking me, trusting me, believing that I had the power to keep her here. I squeezed her hand back and told her, "I promise you, Allison, we're going to do everything we can. You're going to be okay." I don't know if I believed it myself, but I needed her to believe it. The surgery lasted 6 hours. 6 hours of Dr. Fisher's steady hands working miracles while I assisted, monitored, prayed without even realizing I was praying. We repaired the internal bleeding, set the fractures, dealt with complications as they arose. Allison coded twice on that table. Twice her heart stopped beating, and twice we brought her back. Each time felt like a lifetime compressed into seconds. Each time I thought about her mother in the waiting room, about the promise I'd made to a terrified little girl, about my own son at home, and how fragile life really is. When we finally closed her up and moved her to the ICU, I was exhausted in ways that went beyond physical tiredness. Dr. Fisher put her hand on my shoulder and said, "We did good work today, Michael. Now we wait." And that's what we did. We waited. I stayed at the hospital that night checking on Allison every hour even though the nurses told me to go home. I couldn't leave. I'd made her a promise, and I needed to see it through. Allison's parents were allowed brief visits. Her mother, Maria, couldn't stop thanking me through her tears. Her father, Carlos, just kept shaking my hand, unable to find words. They were good people, hardworking people. Carlos was a construction worker. Maria cleaned houses. They'd immigrated from Mexico 15 years ago, built a life here, and Allison was their everything, their only child. Their whole world was lying in that ICU bed, fighting for her life, and all they could do was pray and trust in us. Allison remained in critical condition for 3 days. 3 days where every beep of the monitor made my heart race, where every slight change in her vitals felt monumental. I found myself spending more and more time in her room, even when it wasn't necessary. The other doctors noticed. Some of them gently suggested I was getting too attached, that I needed to maintain professional distance. But how could I? I'd looked into that child's eyes. I'd made her a promise. And more than that, she'd awakened something in me I didn't even know was sleeping. On the 4th day, Allison opened her eyes, really opened them. She was confused at first, disoriented, in pain, but she was alive. Conscious. When she saw me standing there during my morning rounds, she gave me the smallest smile. It was weak and brief, but it was there. "You kept your promise, Uncle," she whispered. My vision blurred with tears I didn't even try to hide. I'm not ashamed to tell you I cried right there in that ICU room. I'd seen patients recover before. I'd celebrated medical victories. But this was different. This was personal in a way nothing had ever been before. The recovery was long and difficult. Allison had to relearn how to walk. Physical therapy was painful and frustrating for a 7-year-old who just wanted to run and play again. There were setbacks, infections, complications, moments when we worried she might not regain full mobility. But that little girl had a fighter's spirit. Every time I visited her, which was almost daily even after she left the ICU, she was working hard, pushing through the pain, determined to get better. Her parents were always there, supporting her, encouraging her, showing her what real love and dedication looked like. During those months of Allison's recovery, something happened to me. I started questioning everything about how I'd been practicing medicine. I realized I'd been treating symptoms and conditions rather than people. I'd been so focused on the science, on the protocols, on doing everything by the book, that I'd forgotten the human element. These weren't just cases to be solved. They were lives, stories, families, dreams and fears and hopes all wrapped up in vulnerable bodies that needed not just my medical expertise but my compassion. I started spending more time with my patients, really talking to them, learning their stories, understanding their fears. I stopped rushing through appointments to check off boxes on my schedule. I held hands when people were scared. I sat with families during difficult conversations instead of standing at the door ready to leave. My colleagues noticed the change. Some thought I was burning myself out, but I'd never felt more alive, more purposeful, more like the doctor I'd always wanted to be. 8 months after the accident, Allison walked out of St. Mary's Hospital on her own 2 feet. She still had a slight limp that would improve with more therapy, but she was walking, smiling, being a kid again. Her parents threw a small celebration, and they invited all of us who'd been part of her care. It was held at their modest home, nothing fancy, just heartfelt gratitude and home-cooked food. Allison ran up to me. Well, she walked quickly with her slight limp and hugged me tight. "Thank you for keeping your promise, Uncle Mike," she said. She'd started calling me Uncle Mike during her recovery, and I loved it. It reminded me that I wasn't just her doctor. I was someone who cared about her as a person, as a beautiful young life that deserved every chance to flourish. That experience changed the entire trajectory of my career. 6 months later, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I left St. Mary's and joined Doctors Without Borders. Natalie supported me, even though it meant I'd be away for months at a time, working in some of the most challenging places on earth. I needed to take what Allison had taught me and apply it where it was needed most. I spent the next 5 years working in disaster zones, refugee camps, remote villages in Africa and Asia. I saw poverty and suffering that broke my heart daily, but I also saw resilience, hope, and the incredible strength of the human spirit. Every patient I treated, I saw Allison's face. Every child I saved reminded me of that promise I'd made in an operating room in Virginia. I stopped being just a doctor who fixed bodies. I became a doctor who saw souls, who understood that healing was about more than medicine. It was about presence, about dignity, about treating every person like they mattered, because they did. They all did. Eventually, I came back to the States. Natalie and I had 2 more children by then, and I wanted to be more present in their lives. I opened a small practice in an underserved neighborhood in Richmond. I treated people regardless of their ability to pay. I worked with community organizations. I trained young doctors, always telling them about Allison, about the importance of seeing the person behind the patient. Some of them got it right away. Others took time. But I never stopped sharing that story because it was the most important lesson I ever learned. Allison is 22 now. She's studying to be a nurse. She calls me sometimes, updates me on her life, tells me about her dreams of helping people the way she was helped. That limp is barely noticeable now. She's vibrant, full of life, chasing her goals with the same determination she showed during her recovery. When I look at her, I don't just see the little girl who grabbed my hand and asked me not to let her die. I see the reason I became the doctor I was always meant to be. She saved me just as much as I saved her. That Tuesday in September didn't just change my life. It gave it meaning, and I will be grateful for that moment, as painful and terrifying as it was, for the rest of my days.